accidentally just exposed himself while trying to create distance from Epstein. Dems are now using a little-known 1928 law to get the Epstein files as the new Epstein jail video got torn apart by CBS News. Many shouting it's just not adding up. What happened with Russia's huge 8.8 magnitude earthquake and the Oprah scandal it created? And the housing situation in America is so horrible that Democrats and Republicans actually work together on something that could change everything. We're talking about all of that and even more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, starting with this. This Epstein scandal just continues to grow. Just so many details in the Epstein story, they're just not adding up, and now the Democrats are hatching a plan to blow it wide open. And where we'll start is with the apparent breakup between Trump and Epstein in 2004. Because the exact reason these lovebirds split, it's kind of been and still is a bit of a mystery, with some reports suggesting it had to do with a bitter real estate deal, and others claiming it was because Epstein acted inappropriately toward a daughter of a member of Mar-a-Lago. And then this month, you had the White House insisting that Trump actually cut ties with him because Epstein was a, quote, creep. But then, this past Monday, during his meeting with Keir Starmer, Trump himself offered a third explanation that seemed to contradict his own White House.
He stole people that work for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again, and I threw him out of the place. Persona non grata.
And so after that, you had people going, okay, so was he a creep or did he poach your staff? And then yesterday you had a reporter pressing him for clarification.
So can you explain that discrepancy?
Well, maybe they're the same thing, you know, it's sort of a little bit of the same thing.
So is that what was meant by being a creep? Me, I'm the travel pool, but I'm with NBC News.
NBC fake news.
But then you had skeptics pointing out that when you combine that with comments like this,
when they steal people, I don't like it.
And this,
the concept of taking people that work for me is bad.
And this,
when I heard about it, I told them, I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people.
It sounds like, or at least his story now, is that Epstein's transgression was that he violated Trump's general rule against poaching employees, and not that he raped underage girls or acted creepy. Though also, when a reporter asked, he did admit that those employees fit a specific demographic.
Were some of them young women?
Well, I don't want to say, but everyone knows the people that were taken, and the answer is yes.
And then, when a reporter asked whether one of those women was Virginia Giuffre, right, the late Epstein survivor who alleged that Maxwell recruited her from Mar-a-Lago when she was a 16-year-old spa attendant there, at first he said,
I don't know.
But then, 6 seconds later, Trump said,
he stole her.
Which, as some have pointed out, seems to throw a wrench in his story, right? Because Giuffre was reportedly poached from Mar-a-Lago in 2000. That's 4 years before Trump stopped talking to Epstein. And in 2002, Trump gave the now infamous quote to New York Magazine in which he called Epstein a terrific guy and said, he's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. And so that would seem to suggest that Trump knew about Epstein's creepy tendencies at employee poaching well before they split up. And as journalist Sarah Blasky reported, Epstein remained on Mar-a-Lago's membership rolls until October 2007. That's roughly 3 years after the apparent breakup and over a year after Epstein was charged with sex crimes. And so on this point, we're just left with more questions now than answers, though the internet has been very happy to fill in the blanks. But also, this isn't the only thing that people are hitting on, because CBS News just published a thorough analysis of the Epstein jail footage that was released by the Department of Justice earlier this month, and there's a lot to talk about. So first of all, the FBI said that anyone trying to enter the tier where Epstein's cell was would have been caught by the camera. But as CBS pointed out, the pathway from the primary entrance of the common area to the stairs is completely obscured. And when you see Epstein for the first and only time on camera being escorted to a cell at 7:49 p.m., you don't actually see him ascend the stairs.
Here's the sliver of stairs. Epstein is here with his escort, and they walk off screen.
Then at 8:21, another inmate being escorted the same way can't be seen climbing the stairs either. And then when a guard supposedly visited Epstein's cell around 10:30, you can see her heading in that direction, but not going up the stairs. Next, at 10:38, the camera does capture someone on the stairs, but it's not clear exactly who. With the DOJ's Inspector General report suggesting it's probably the same guard carrying a bundle of bedding or clothing. But several video forensics experts told CBS they're skeptical of that and think it could actually be an inmate. And that detail, it's important because, according to the FBI, this was the last time that anyone approached Epstein's cell block before his body was discovered the next morning. What's more concerning is, although the authorities claim that nobody could actually enter the special housing unit without one of the two guards there letting them in with a key, the video itself seems to disprove that. Or because at around 4 a.m., someone walked into the unit, apparently without the help of either guard. Though regardless, at least a half a dozen times, one of the guards reportedly exits the frame in the direction of the door anyway. And there's a number of additional quirks with the footage that experts pointed out to CBS, such as that one, a mouse cursor appears at one point indicating that it's actually not the raw file, but likely a screen recording. 2, the video's metadata suggests it's actually 2 separate clips stitched together with editing software. 3, the metadata also shows it was edited and saved multiple times. 4, at 11 hours and 59 minutes, the video skips 1 minute ahead to midnight and the aspect ratio changes. Right? And in regard to the missing minute, as we've talked about before, you had Attorney General Pam Bondi saying that it was an automatic nightly reset of the cameras, and she promised to release more footage showing that they are in fact reset every night. But not only has the White House still failed to provide that evidence now 3 weeks after that promise, but also a high-level government government source told CBS that the FBI and other agencies actually possess the full unedited footage and that there's no missing minute in it. Now then, with all that, the Inspector General report mentions a second functioning camera, and so you had CBS figuring, hey, that could at least corroborate the nightly reset claim. But the thing is, when they asked about it, the response was textbook Kafka.
We reached out to the Department of Justice to see about obtaining that footage. They referred us to the FBI, who referred us back to the Department of Justice.
But if they're not going to hand over the footage, let alone the files, willingly, Congress just might force them to. And no, House Speaker Mike Johnson did not have a change of heart. He's still blocking the resolution from Thomas Massie and others. Rather, what we're seeing is that the Democrats have discovered a little trick that may let them bypass the Republican majority. Because you see, it turns out that there's a rarely invoked law from 1928 that compels an executive branch agency to hand over requested information when it is requested by at least 5 members of the Senate's Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. And it just so happens that there are 7 Democrats on that committee. And so today, all of them, along with Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, sent a letter to the DOJ demanding the full and complete Epstein files. And they requested those files by August 15th, saying,
"Our request covers all documents, files, evidence, and other materials in possession of the DOJ, the FBI, related to the case of the United States versus Jeffrey Epstein. Every single time Donald Trump or his administration or Republican leaders have had a chance to be transparent about the Epstein files, they have chosen to hide. Donald Trump should stop hiding from the truth. He should stop hiding from the American people."
Now, a possible caveat here is that this 5-member rule, it has not faced significant tests in the court, so it's actually unclear whether it's going to be enforceable. But still, this is actually a bold move from Schumer. Because, while there's been a lot of talk, and recently he demanded a closed-door briefing between the White House and Senate on the Epstein files, and he's called for the FBI to conduct a counterintelligence threat assessment related to the files. Now he's actually doing something with some teeth. And notably, if this move provokes a legal battle with the White House, then that'll force Senate Republicans to choose between backing Trump and protecting their own power of congressional oversight. Though there, I have to note that any legal case, it could take years and might end up before the Supreme Court. But for now, just more and more continuing to happen on this Trump-Epstein front. And then you've got more news in just a minute. But first, what if you could eat something that's actually healthy, it's quick, and it takes low effort? Well, meet today's sponsor, Huel, Black Edition, your new best friend when in a hurry. 30-second prep time, right? Don't get stuck in the kitchen while hunger takes over. And personally, I reach for it because it's packed with 40 grams of protein per serving, fueling my body the right way after workouts and long days. No artificial sweeteners. It's all about keeping things clean and simple. It's gluten-free, plant-based, loaded with 27 vitamins and minerals. I'm getting everything I need in one quick meal. But the best part, it's only $2.65 per meal. Why spend more on lunch when you can have something healthier and easier? Maybe you're tired waiting for your lunch break. Huel makes it easy to eat well on the go. No more overpriced takeout. From chocolate to salted caramel, there's a flavor for every craving. Huel's my go-to when I'm in a rush, but I still want to feel good about what I'm putting in my body. And hey, with your first order, you get a free shaker and t-shirt. So if you're ready to save time and eat right, new customers can get $15 off with a minimum order of $75 at Huel.com/Phil, or hey, just scan that QR code and use code Phil. Don't just take my word for it. Try it and feel the difference yourself. And then next up in the news, we've got to talk about this massive earthquake in Russia. Because this 8.8 magnitude quake hitting just off of eastern Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula yesterday. And while you might zoom out on that map and think, okay, that looks scary, but it's a very far away problem. The thing is, 8.8 is big. In fact, it is the 6th biggest earthquake ever recorded. With that then also resulting in footage of people experiencing the shake in Russia, like these doctors who were performing a surgery and then had to hold the patient down as it played out. As well as, no shortage of videos of people inside buildings, the things moving all over, videos outside where people were fleeing as chimneys were collapsing to the ground, and even of sea lions diving into the water as quakes hit and rocks fell down from the hills above them. Hell, even one of the biggest volcanoes in the northern hemisphere began erupting in its aftermath. Now, the good news is, according to BBC News, some people were injured, but so far there have been no fatalities. And with that, Russia, where we first saw tsunami waves, you had the BBC reporting that waves up to 13 feet hit ports and caused flooding, with waves then making their way to Japan, where around 2 million people were told to evacuate and get to higher ground. Also with this, I'll say you might be seeing some of the waves and thinking, okay, is that really a tsunami? Well, yeah, it turns out it is. It just, they don't look like the movies. Right? A tsunami isn't like one singular monster wave crashing ashore with, for example, Dan Snyder, the tsunami warning coordinator with the National Tsunami Warning Center, telling CBS News, it's a series of powerful waves over a long period of time. Tsunamis cross the ocean at hundreds of miles an hour, as fast as a jet airplane in deep water. But when they get close to the shore, they slow down and start to pile up. And that's where the inundation problem becomes a little bit more possible there. And adding, in this case, because of the Earth basically sending out these huge ripples of water across the ocean, they're going to be moving back and forth for quite a while. And so that's why, while many areas have lifted their warnings and advisories, some places were under alert for hours and may still continue to see dangerous tides and currents for a while. Which then brings us to the United States, where the coasts of Hawaii, California, Alaska, Oregon, and Washington were all under some form of alert. And here I'll start with Hawaii, because that's where where most of the headlines are coming from. With gridlock traffic, sirens, and more causing chaos on the island as people were warned to go evacuate, go inland, or find higher elevations.
I would say that a lot of the people that, sorry, we have a siren going off now.
Well, the situation has since been downgraded. There was a very real panic leading up to it, with officials predicting waves up to 10 feet. And you had a retired Coast Guard chief telling the New York Times, "People are driving like idiots. I have moved 100 feet in the last hour." Luckily, so far, minimal damage has been done, with waves hitting at 7:30 p.m. local time, peaking at just under 6 feet, with then local outlets sharing footage of flooding, and you had Hawaiian Governor Josh Green explaining in a press conference again, even if that doesn't sound big, these are not just normal waves.
This is a longitudinal wave with great force driving through the shoreline and into land. That's why we ask people to evacuate very far back.
And then, I gotta say, as far as people who are evacuating, you have a lot of people talking a lot about Oprah. Because you see, she owns property on Maui, and you had tons of people online claiming that she had closed off a private road that people could have used to evacuate, with people saying that it worsened the traffic in the area, and that contributing to larger backlash that we've seen over the years regarding wealthy people buying up land in Hawaii and pricing out locals, making it harder to live there. And while you had some just pissed that Oprah owns a road to begin with, I will say that claims that she kept the road closed, those have been disputed by both officials in Hawaii and Oprah herself. Because you had a press release from the Maui police regarding the tsunami warning, noting that, quote, "Oprah's road is open to get up country." And a spokesperson for Oprah also issued a statement saying, "As soon as we heard the tsunami warnings, we contacted local law enforcement and FEMA to ensure the road was open. Any reports otherwise are false." But that seemingly has done very little to quell the outrage that she's been facing online. People saying that she bought up land on the island like a monopoly board, and others just generally arguing that billionaires should not own roads. Right, but then all of that, it brings us to the mainland United States, where again, tsunami waves have hit, but they're mostly fine. Crescent City, California saw waves of over 3 feet tall. And notably, that area has seen devastating tsunamis in the past, but this time around, it is expected to be much different. With the city manager telling the LA Times, "It is going to be an event that creates a lot of disruption in the ocean, a lot of strong currents. We're asking people to stay away from the beaches, stay away from the mouths of the river and any low-lying area, especially as disruptions in the ocean could last as long as 30 hours. And that is, you had most waves hitting early in the morning, so the footage has also been minimal. But also in this video from the San Francisco Bay Area, you can see boats rising and falling pretty dramatically with the water levels. You also had waves hitting areas of Washington State, but it does seem that for all the coastal areas of the US, the worst is over with little damage reported, which is definitely a relief. Though again, the ocean will likely continue to fluctuate in impacted areas. Now that said, warnings are making their ways to other parts of the globe, with the Galapagos Islands issuing evacuation orders this morning. Chile also issued a red alert for most of its coast. And then back in Russia, aftershocks have been ongoing, and the country could see pretty sizable ones for around a month. And then next up in the news, we've got to talk about how hundreds of criminal cases are being tossed out right now, not because they're BS or there's a legal loophole, but because defense attorneys just stopped showing up. And specifically, what I'm talking about here is the Massachusetts justice system just falling apart. Right? Because you have lawyers there refusing to take on cases for defendants that can't pay as a protest for higher wages. And that is then forcing judges there to dismiss dozens of criminal cases, even those with potentially violent defendants. Right? And to fully understand how we got to this point, we also have to talk about exactly how the system works in Massachusetts. Because you see, unlike in most states, Massachusetts, they rely heavily on private lawyers rather than public defenders to handle cases where the defendants can't pay for an attorney. I mean, we're talking about roughly 80% of cases like this being handled by private attorneys. And because the defendant can't pay and the right to legal representation is, guaranteed in the Constitution, the state pays those attorneys. They contract them and they call them bar advocates. Except in Massachusetts, bar advocates are reportedly not paid anywhere near the amount as their counterparts in nearby states. The state offers just $65 an hour for these cases, which is less than half of the $150 that attorneys are making in Maine. And then also in looking around, you find New Hampshire's rate is $125 and $100 plus in Vermont and Rhode Island. And so you have these mass attorneys asking the state to hike their wages up to $100 an hour for these cases. And with that, you have Jennifer O'Brien, a lawyer in Middlesex County, saying, "We're trying to save this program because at this rate, half of what bordering states are paying, no one in Massachusetts is going to do this work anymore. That's the risk the legislature is taking." And so now you've got the attorneys giving the system a taste of the potential consequences, right? Because since Memorial Day, they've just stopped doing bar advocate work. And as more lawyers joined the pretty loosely organized protest, the number of defendants going without representation, they just multiplied. With the whole thing then coming to a head last week, where you had judges forced to dismiss 102 criminal cases in Boston and the surrounding area, thanks to a state law that says that after 45 days, if defendants still do not have a court-appointed attorney, the charges against them have to be dismissed entirely. And again, these cases that have been dismissed, some of them have violent charges attached to them. Or things like one defendant who was released from custody despite being accused of threatening the mother of his child with a gun while she held their baby. And then another defendant was accused of spraying cologne on her nephew and using a lighter to burn his arm. And so with that in mind, you had a spokesperson for the local DA saying, "We consider this an extraordinarily dangerous moment for the public. We are informing victims and witnesses that these these cases are being dismissed, and those are very difficult conversations. They want justice, and we want justice for them. And so in part, you're seeing many people laying the blame entirely at the feet of the attorneys here. With, for example, one former Massachusetts police chief saying, it's very irresponsible, it's selfish, and it's greedy. You don't just get to not come to work because the whole system breaks down. The police officers are out in the street doing their job, the judges, the court officers, the prosecutors. We don't get to walk out the door because we aren't getting paid enough. To which you then had the attorneys within the Mass Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers replying that it would be better if those angry with them help advocate for better pay. With one responding, I would say back to them, help us get the pay up. Help us make sure we have a system that functions. I think it indicates how deep a problem this is, but this has been a problem for so many years that Massachusetts political entities are just so kind of used to bar advocates saying, okay, I'll take the really low pay and I'll do it because I believe in the work. Additionally, we've seen a few political figures addressing the issue, with Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, for example, calling on the legislature and the attorneys to come to a solution. And that, as you had State Senator Michael Rodriguez just telling lawyers to, quote, get back to work, and adding, we are ready and willing to work with them, but a preemptive work stoppage serves only to harm victims, defendants, and the overall justice system. Right, and all of that is, we don't know how far off a possible solution could even be, especially considering the 2026 fiscal year budget that was signed by Healey earlier this month reportedly did not include any raises for bar advocates. But also, with everything that's been said, I will say the one saving grace here is that of the cases that have been dismissed, they were dismissed without prejudice. And that's important because it means that the prosecutors can refile the charges if and when defense representation is made available. Of course, what does that really mean if a defendant who is maybe guilty of something is still a threat and they're just not being prosecuted because of what's happening? And so that's why with this, one, we're going to have to keep our eyes on this. And two, in the meantime, I'd really love to know your thoughts here. Are you on the lawyer's side here? Yes, no? Is there a sort of middle ground where you support them but not how they're doing it or the timing? Or what's your take? What's your reaction here to what the lawyers are doing and how they're doing it? And then I've got even more news you need to know. But first, summer is here, and if you're going to burn cash at the pump, you might as well get something back, right? And so enter the Upside app, today's sponsor, and the app that's basically like finding a $5 bill in your pocket every time you fill up. I mean, it is seriously that easy. All you got to do is open the app, claim an offer, pay as usual, and boom, cash back straight into your account. No points, no weird rewards that make you feel like you're solving a puzzle, just cash, real money in your bank or PayPal. I mean, some users are raking up to $300 a month. I mean, just imagine that. $300 for doing what you're already doing, fueling up, grabbing a bite, or stocking up on snacks. And you're not limited. Upside works at over 100,000 spots like Shell, 7-Eleven, Taco Bell, Wendy's, and more. You can even earn 3 times more with Upside than your regular credit card rewards. So before you fill up this summer, check Upside. I mean, trust me, use it every time. It's the move, and to find out how much you could earn, just scan that QR code or click the link in the description. Download Upside, use code DeFranco, and get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. Let's make this summer a little less brutal on your bank account. And then, next up in the news, America's housing crisis has now gotten so bad that it's actually getting Republican and Democratic lawmakers to agree on something. And in fact, they're pushing forward the first big housing landmark bill in over a decade. So it's called the Renewing Opportunity in the American Dream to Housing Act of 2025, or Road to Housing Act for short. They're backed by Republican Tim Scott and Democrat Elizabeth Warren, though I will say it does seem to have widespread bipartisan support. And that because its first big hurdle was the Senate Banking Committee, which advanced the bill with unanimous support. And while the Road to Housing Act has a ton of provisions, in general, it tries to directly tackle a lot of the core reasons that America's housing is just so damn expensive. So for example, it would largely cut all the red tape around building houses, such as the various zoning codes almost all American neighborhoods have. Not to mention getting rid of a lot of bureaucracy around building a home, because there are some regulations that are essentially the same thing as other things, but a builder needs to get approval twice. And so this would get rid of those double requirements. And it also wants to tackle other red tape, such as by streamlining the environmental review process home builders have to go through. Additionally, it would try to set up loan programs to help people with low to moderate incomes to actually be able to buy a home. There are also incentives for cities and states to try and get them to build more. However, I will say, even if the bill does pass, there might be a small hiccup. A lot of these changes would actually need to be carried out by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And considering that that is a federal agency controlled by Trump, it has seen widespread funding and staffing cuts. So there are concerns about how effective the agency can be, and will they actually be able to execute the Road to Housing Act. In fact, it's such a concern that Warren thinks that some changes to the bill might be necessary, saying there are new programs here that should operate more directly with the states and local communities so that we're not at the mercy of a stripped-down HUD. But I worry about HUD being under-resourced to meet its current obligations, much less to take on more. And you even have Republicans acknowledging that HUD might struggle with all the changes. But also, at the same time, they're saying that it's better than nothing, with, for example, Senator Mike Rounds saying, you have to start someplace. And part of it is to upgrade and modernize a number of the issues that are causing us problems. And that is, for many senators, this bill is years worth of work. And to be so close at the same time that HUD is being ripped up, it's frustrating. So you have senators like Tina Smith lamenting that, quote, we shouldn't be tearing HUD apart at the same time that we're trying to make some good policy reforms in this bill. But regardless, it's clear to lawmakers that something has to be done, because because getting a house right now is so extremely difficult for people. Interest rates are fairly high, making mortgages far harder to keep up with, and housing prices just refuse to budge. And in general, the market's been seen as so odd right now that there are concerns that we're verging on another housing bubble. And I mean, just looking at recent changes, I mean, during the pandemic, the median price for an American house was $250,000. It is now approaching $450,000, which is an all-time high. You know, one of the things that stands out is that normally when interest rates rise, home prices plummet. But despite a sharp rise in interest rates, homes have managed to hold on to their price. And while not all of it, a lot of it is because of supply and demand, and there just aren't enough homes. That's partially because not a lot of houses are being built, which is something that the Road to Housing Act is trying to address. But again, also it's because of interest rates, right? If you bought a home during the pandemic, your interest rate is probably below 3%. So you've got people going, well, how the hell can I sell a house now if I'm gonna have to get another mortgage and get that at probably closer to 7%? That is a huge difference. And so we're in such a weird place, it's been described as neither a seller nor a buyer's market. But hey, for now, we're gonna have to see where this bill goes, though understand it has a long way to go. Because, you know, even though it has widespread support, and so there's a solid chance that it might pass relatively unscathed, even if it does pass, it'll likely be years before we see a lot of the results. But then, finally today, let's end on a congratulations and talk about y'all's comments. Starting with a congratulations to Nicholas S., Seatgeek's latest weekly winner, and he's using his $500 to take his wife to see Billie Eilish. Right, and for the rest of y'all, Seatgeek is still giving away $500 in tickets, and you should definitely enter today if you haven't already. You could be the next winner and snag $500 towards seeing your favorite artist, sporting event, or play. I mean, there's like over 70,000 events to choose from. And all you gotta do is just add code PDS to your Seatgeek app profile for a chance at the weekly $500 prize, no purchase necessary. It'll even save you some money on tickets. It's a win-win, go for it. But all of that said, let's talk about y'all's comments in some commentary. And yesterday, what I largely found was that many of you were suffering from, oh my God, I agree with MTG-itis. With, for example, Dollar Dude saying agreeing with MTG on anything is an incredibly weird feeling. And Marjorie Green has been saying/doing a lot I actually like recently, and I am struggling to reconcile and cope with this dramatic change. But also, in the replies to those comments, you had things like, I mean, keep in mind, this is the same woman who implied that Jews control the weather with space lasers. So in this instance, she might just be right for the wrong reason, right? And so that, you know, touching on the argument that many people have that Marjorie Taylor Greene has a history of anti-Semitic comments and conspiracies. And then extending past that, we've had this situation recently where all of a sudden you have people who are against Netanyahu and what the Israeli government is doing, finding themselves on the same side as just straight up anti-Semitic people. Well, obviously they themselves not being anti-Semitic because they are just against Netanyahu and what the Israeli government is doing. You know, really the whole thing has left me wondering, you know, I know that we live in a world, or at least America is trying to push forward a world where it's really more about hard power over soft power, and rather than like it mattering if anyone, like what anyone thinks about your country. You know, it genuinely feels that Netanyahu and his enablers have done possibly irreparable damage to Israel, and I think made the world less safe for Jewish people worldwide. Because I mean, just over the last year, I've seen so many people going from this mindset of, you know, Israel's a victim and we have to think about Israel to Israel's the bad guy. You know, I can only imagine where things are going to be 5 to 10 years from now. You know, while a lot of the coverage has been focused on like Republicans or Trump supporters who have been speaking out, at least according to the polling, this is a much bigger issue when it comes to independents and Democrats. With, for example, a recent Gallup poll finding, right, the support for Israel's military action in Gaza from before 2024 to this latest July, Republicans went from 71% approval to 71% approval, but independents went from 47% to 25%, and Democrats went from 36% to 8%. And then also the difference of opinion based on age is huge, right? Because while 47% of 55 and older Americans have a favorable view of Netanyahu, only 6% of 18 to 34-year-old Americans had a favorable opinion. And keep in mind, this is polling from the 7th to the 21st of this month. Even just this last week, I've seen drastic changes in the conversation that's been playing out. And so, you know, I'm aware that most of the comments underneath the video, it's about the news stories of the day, but I will say for this, if nothing else stuck out to you, you're not commenting about that, let me know if you've seen reactions and opinions changing in your day-to-day life. And that, my friend, you beautiful bastard, is where today's show is gonna end. But let me leave you with 3 things. 1, you're now getting more videos every single week, with a new video on this channel now getting uploaded every single day except on Saturday. 2, my brand new podcast, In Good Faith with Philip DeFranco, is now 17th and still rising over on Spotify's trending podcasts. And if you haven't yet, go over there, follow, hit that 5 stars. I actually got a new episode coming for you in the next day or 2. But hey, no matter what, 3, I'll see you right back here tomorrow, because there is no such thing as a slow news day in 2025. Stay safe out there.